Hey everybody, Daniel from Spacedock here. Just a quick heads up before we get started. Our original science fiction audio drama, The SOJOURN, is now available on Audible, Google Books, Patreon, Scribd, and iTunes. We've been really excited to see the reception it's been getting, and if you're interested in checking it out, you can find the links below this video. If you decide to get the series through Patreon and pledge at $1 tier or higher, not only will you get every volume of The SOJOURN as and when it's completed, but you'll also get access to The SOJOURN Visual Dictionary, which is our comprehensive digital lore book on The SOJOURN, done in the style of the classic Star Wars visual dictionaries. Please do consider checking it out. It's a real passion project for us, and I think a lot of you would really enjoy it. Hey everybody, I'm Daniel from Spacedock, and my question is this. Why doesn't anyone ever surrender or run away in a space battle? All across science fiction, it never happens. Everyone always fights to the death until their ship explodes. Does anyone really think that this is a realistic depiction of how it would be? Almost no warfare in history has gone this way. And the reason for this is annihilating your enemy and leaving them no option to surrender or escape, or standing your ground and allowing yourself to be destroyed, is normally not in the interest of either side. For the side that's winning in a battle, causing a ship to surrender or to run away is functionally the same as destroying it, except that you've saved ammunition and time in which you might have lost more lives or your ship might have suffered more damage. Any reasonable commander would be thrilled to see an enemy ship surrender, because they don't have to worry about it anymore, and presumably any commander who was fighting a losing battle and had an opportunity to be taken as a prisoner of war along with his crew, rather than die in a horrible explosion, would take that option on behalf of himself and his men to preserve their lives. Historically speaking, war has always been more about taking the hill and winning the battle than it has been about destroying the enemy. Let's take the age of musketry, for instance. The entire construct of how war was fought in those days was around this method. You watch historical movies about the Napoleonic Wars, and people who aren't very well versed in history will think, why, it's so silly that they walk around at marching speed and nobody ever runs or hides behind anything. The fact is, muskets were staggeringly inaccurate in those days, and you were pretty much just as difficult to hit standing still as you would be moving around. But more importantly, what they were doing was preserving fatigue. They were avoiding fatigue. They were keeping all of their men energetic and ready to go, and the reason for this is, if you want to take a hill, the best way to do it is to make the people on it run away, or surrender. So almost every engagement between two units of men in those days was done by marching up to them, exchanging fire for a while. Hopefully, the result of the exchange of fire is that they have fewer men than you do, and then when you know for sure that you have that large numerical advantage now, you charge in with your bayonets, and the enemy runs away. Always runs away. Nobody ever stands around and gets stabbed to death with a bayonet. Bayonets were almost never used to actually kill anyone, and yet they were probably the most effective tool of war in the time, because they, with almost 100% effectiveness, made people run away, and then when they have run away, you've got the hill, the battle's over, and you'd have to be mad to then try and continue fighting them to the last man at the risk of your own people, driving them into a corner where they're forced to fight you back with even more ferocity. It's tactically unnecessary. And why should it be any different for a space battle? In fact, with ships filled with people, you'd be increasing the chance of there being mutinies, because you'd have a whole lot of varying opinions on what should be done aboard the ship. A captain who sees which way the wind's blowing and strikes his colours is not going to get his men killed. And a captain who wants to fight to the death and get all his men killed might wind up being knocked out or imprisoned or shot by his crew so that they can save their own lives, because that's just what desperate humans do in situations like that. I think we can agree that it would at least be a point of contention, it would at least be a factor in space battles. And yet almost every depiction I can think of in science fiction has everyone accepting their fates wordlessly and enthusiastically fighting to complete destruction every time. And it's not even just because, one side is a evil, menacing faction like the Borg or whatever who would just destroy everything, because that's not always the case. You know, the Empire from Star Wars are indeed evil. They're a totalitarian fascist empire, but I still find it hard to believe that they wouldn't accept the enemy's surrender in order to win a battle, especially if not doing so might cause them to lose, or at least win at a much greater cost, because that's just stupidity. It's not really something motivated by morals, it's more motivated by practicality. I can understand it with a faction that is a completely unthinking, menacing evil, like the Borg, or the Shadows from B5, or the Reapers from Mass Effect, anything to that effect, but I feel like any kind of thinking, relatively relatable, military-minded race like the Klingons, or any hostile human power from various other works of fiction, would make this a massive part of their approach to warfare. And I just find it a little odd that it's such completely unexamined ground in so much science fiction. In fact, the only time I can really think of it happening is in Battlefleet Gothic Armada, the Warhammer game. Sometimes you get people who want to surrender, and then you have to execute them to get them to keep fighting in true Warhammer fashion. But I feel like that's definitely something that's included in the game as part of its on-brand Warhammer-y world building and for a bit of satire, rather than as an actual examination of how that might factor into a space battle. Those of you who've listened to the SOJOURN will know that one of the very first things that happens in the first episode is somebody strikes their colours in a space battle, because it's just something that I wanted to include. It feels like an obvious reality of that kind of combat that has been oddly ignored. But to any science fiction writers listening, I would encourage you to include these kind of things in space battles. It's more of a human element. It makes it feel less like a bunch of ships having a fight and more like a bunch of people in ships having a fight, which, if you watched my how to write a space battle video, is very much in character for that. Just once in a big mainstream science fiction property, maybe a Star Wars film or something, I'd quite like to see a captain look at the situation and say, "Sorry chaps, we've lost this one. I'm signalling our surrender. Everyone's going to have to go to a prisoner of war camp, or maybe we'll be like ransomed back to our nation or whatever, but at least we're not going to die in a giant fireball." And all of his men go, "Yeah, fair enough." Because that's just the way it went down quite a lot in naval battles of history and land battles of history. And maybe the enemy even gets to capture a ship out of the whole ordeal, which is something they definitely want to do, reverse engineer stuff, learn things about the enemy's technology. It's just good for everyone. So yeah, that's my advice to science fiction writers. Write battles and wars in such a way that the people in them are trying to win the battle and win the war rather than kill people. It may not create as much spectacle, but the violence has always been a means to secure an objective rather than the ends itself, and I think it all feels a little bit more real if we remember that. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you all for listening. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. Thank you for watching Spacedock. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please do check out the links on the screen right now or in the description below for our Patreon and channel membership services. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving our team and our equipment and allowing us to put together bigger and more exciting video projects for you guys on the channel.